Today is February 16th, 2025. It would have been the 53rd birthday of my best friend who passed away tragically in the summer of this past year. I've been thinking a lot about my best friend, and I've been also thinking about the idea of grief. So I thought I would make a video today on what would have been his 53rd birthday to talk about what I've learned about grief after having lost both of my parents and now my best friend. In the past, several years, I lost my father over 20 years ago, my mother about 5 years ago, and now my best friend about a half a year ago. And what I have learned about grief is that the more you have in the past during the person's life relied on them, relied on their wisdom, relied on their love, relied on their character, personality, the more that you have invested in that person and relied upon them to get you through difficult times and to share awesome adventures and joy, the more the grief process is extended. For me, and I think for everyone, grief is different. In the case of both of my parents, they passed away after not very long extended sicknesses, but within under a year for both of them. So there was an opportunity in that time to have processed some of the grief, gone through some of the stages before they actually passed away. In the case of Lee, he died suddenly. He collapsed in his home. I believe it was a Sunday evening. His wife immediately called emergency response. They came quickly, but were unable to revive him. So it was a shock to everyone. Obviously, his family, especially traumatic and tragic, leaving behind a wife and 3 young children that he loved, and they loved him as well. I didn't know for sure that he had passed away for several days, just in the process of trying to get confirmation. The only phone number I had that I could phone or to leave messages on was Lee's phone. And after about 24 hours of not getting a definitive answer, I just texted him, which his wife eventually got that text and then responded to me about another 24 hours later. So it was about 2 days before I knew. I knew, but I needed it to be confirmed definitively. So that was a very tragic and shocking death, which I hadn't really experienced before. All the close loved ones that I've lost, it was an extended period, and some of the grief process was worked through leading up to their final loss of life. Anyways, so that it differed in the sense that it was unexpected. It's always difficult to lose someone that's of your age or younger, particularly brutal is losing a child. Obviously, that's probably the worst thing that can happen to someone that you have responsibility over, and it's your charge to protect them and to see them prosper. To lose a child is unthinkable. To lose a parent is difficult, and but it at the same time is something that we're conditioned to expect at some point. It's always difficult still, or for most people it's difficult. But to lose someone very close to you that's the same age as yourself, in this case a best friend or a sibling, it's a different experience. And so the processor going through grief, the explanation that I resonated with most was Brett Weinstein's, the evolutionary biologist's explanation of grief and how we process grief. And it's been several years since I listened to that explanation, but my takeaway from that, I've spoken with many people about over the years, and my takeaway has been that as we process the loss of that person in our life, when things arise in our lives where we would reach out to that person, or where we would lean on that person, or where we would share with that person joy, etc., there's that feeling of loss. And so when they come up in our mind, and in this moment of emotion, they spring to mind, the pain that follows is that grief of realization of loss. And what happens over time is that we at first are thinking about them constantly, and all of the joy and sadness and all the emotions, the whole spectrum of emotions that we go through in the days and weeks and months following the loss of a close loved one. It's exaggerated, it's compounded. There's a lot of thought that goes into them. It's hard not to think about them. And what happens is that we start to slowly hear the echo and the resonance of their response to our emotion, or our desire to reach out to them. If it's a question that you would want to ask, say for example a parent, if you're looking for guidance, or if it's a friend and you want to reach out about an idea or a thought or a memory, we start to formulate a response that resonates with the way that they would have responded in that situation. And in a sense, we start to build a model of that person that sits separate from our own personality in our mind, and is like a ghost of their mind and who they are. And so as we start to develop this, like by going through the extreme grief at the beginning of this stage, and then as we slowly start to taper off of that extreme pain, there begins to be almost a reemergence of that person within your own psyche as an independent entity. It's almost like having them with you all the time. And Brett Weinstein talks about this, and probably much more eloquently than me, but it becomes a living remembrance, and a living, not just a remembrance, a living entity within yourself, within your own psyche, that you can then share joy with and share heartache with, without having it bring the same amount of pain as it did in the early process of the grief, because that person's there and they're answering you within their psyche. They start to speak back to you as if it was them and how they would respond. And we can savor that interaction within our own mind because it's authentic and it's something that we've worked out through this process of the grief process, which has built this response curve or this model of a response, a series of a type of response that you would have expected for an individual circumstance. It begins to build them stronger and more refined and with higher resolution than we may have had before they passed away, when we could just reach out to them by phone or by text or visit in person and have them in our presence. We wouldn't have required to have had such a high resolution, model of them within our own psyche. So, what does this all mean? Grief, while it never truly leaves us, because there's always going to be moments when the pain is there, it starts to, I'm not going to say numb, because it's not a numbing, it's a honing of our ability to live with that model of our loved one within us. And I think that's where the thought and the concept of loved ones always being with us, maybe it's something that we would hear from in a religious context or however you want to frame it, but that concept that they're with you always, they're always looking down on you, because in a sense they're with you within the powerful supercomputer of our mind that allows us to have them with us at all times. But it's still painful, and it's still early, and it's still so different, because when you're the same age as someone, I mean, we had plans to grow old together as best friends. We had plans to do things together. We had creative projects that we wanted to explore. We had adventures to go on and long talks to have, and to share stories of our families and our children. And that was all taken away and lost. But I only can take some consolation in the fact that by knowing him so long and so well, that I have a piece of him within me that I can lean on in difficult times and also share joy with during great times. So anyways, a little bit of a sadder video today, but on the day that would have been Lee's 53rd birthday, I really wanted to do something to honor him and honor his memory. So that's why I decided to do this little talk on grief. And it's something I've thought a lot about, having lost a lot of people that were close to, most of the people that are close to me in my life I've lost. So it's something I've had a lot of time and unfortunately a lot of energy that I've invested in. But I hope this resonates with some of you out there. Probably this won't be a very popular video. I mean, I can't imagine many people watching this, but if it does help you or resonate with you, I'm glad for that. And for me, it's just cathartic to be able to sit and talk about Lee and remember Lee and to think about him. And then also just to conceptualize how we deal as humans with loss and try to make sense of living beyond the loss. So thanks for joining me for this video, and thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your weekend and great rest of your day. Thanks again. Bye.